Okay, the next procedure we're going to take a look at on this crankshaft and bearing install or roll-in is to actually establish what the vertical oil clearance or the bearing clearance is between the main and the main bearings that we have just installed into the engine. The manufacturer has laid out main bearing to crankshaft clearance is in the range of 1 8/10,000 or on the low scale 1 thou to 4 thou or 4 7/10. So we need a range of vertical oil clearance between 1 and 4 thou. That helps establish which plastic gauge we are going to use. This is Clevite 77 engine bearing plastic gauge. The plastic gauge on the end of the box tells us which one we need to use. The red one in particular runs specifications from anywhere from 2 thou to 6 thousandths of an inch. The green one runs anywhere from 1 thou to 3 thousandths of an inch. So we have to know what the running clearance is based on specification first, so we know which gauge to use when we're checking it in chassis. The manufacturer has told us that we're in the range of 1 to 4, so we're going to pick a 2 to 6 thou, hopefully falling within the range and being able to use this particular gauge to establish vertical oil clearance, or the clearance that's available between the bearings and the main journal when installed in the engine. Okay, carrying on, what we're going to do is de-torque this main. We've already torqued it in to set the bearing in its position so that we know that it's correctly installed. The crankshaft turned, no problem. Now we're going to release the torque. So now once we've removed the bolts, the fasteners are loose, we're going to use the fasteners again to help us remove the bearing cap. And we can see we have a nice clean surface on the bearing, nice clean surface on the crankshaft. At this point, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the crank journal is completely clean and free of any oil or debris. So again, we're going to come in with some brake clean. We're going to wipe the journal surface nice and clean. And what we want to do is we want to have this completely free and dry of any oil so that it does not affect the plastic gauge when we install it to check the clearance. So now, carrying on, we have the plastic gauge out, and you can see each one of these is a gauge point that helps us establish the running clearance in the engine. So it tells us here that the spec that we are using with this gauge is 2 thou to 6 thou, being the red, and we want to try and fall within that 1 to 4 thou of manufacturer specifications for running vertical oil clearance. So what we need to do is use this gauge now, cut it to the right size, and then we're going to install it on the crank journal. Okay, so now that we've established the width of it for the journal, we're going to open it up and we're going to take out the plasticine gauge, or the plastic gauge, and it's nothing more than a little piece of putty that's made up of a oil-based material, very similar to plasticine. So what we're going to do is we're going to flatten that in the vertical oil clearance when we reinstall it into the engine, and then later we're going to take it apart and then measure the clearance to give us our actual established vertical oil clearance in the engine. Now we're going to take this gauge and we're going to set it directly across the crankshaft journal. The next thing we're going to do is to take a little bit of fresh, clean engine oil and we're going to lube the bearing. The reason we're doing that is because the bearing does not like to have anything put on it, including your fingerprints. So we don't want the plastic gauge to be impregnated into the babbitt or tin overlay of the babbitt bearing. So what I've done is put lots of lube on it, so now when we put it into its position, it will compress and not stick to the bearing, but be squeezed out onto the crankshaft to give us an established clearance value. So again, paying attention to the install, lock to lock, cam side arrows, positioning the bearing cap, Using the bolts as a guide pin. Tapping the bearing cap into position. Pause. Now that the cap's been installed, we're going to do a rundown on it. And tightening the bolts from side to side so we're pulling the cap down equally into position. Most of the positioning of the cap has been established by tapping it with the hammer, and now we're just running it down the rest of the way with the fasteners. So I'm just going to snug that up, torque it to specification. And then removing the cap once again. So we've got to break the torque. Okay, now once the torque has been broken and the fasteners are loosened, we're going to take out the cap again. So now once we've removed the cap, you can see we still have the oil. There's a slight hint of the plastic gauge visible here. We have lots of oil still on here, and that helps that bearing to avoid the plastic gauge from sticking to it. Now if we come back down to the crank journal, we can see that the plastic gauge has been flattened and it's actually stuck to the crankshaft. That's exactly what we want to do, is we want to stick it to the crankshaft, not the engine bearings, because then it takes time to clean engine bearings and it can compromise their integrity by actually impregnating this plasticine material into the bearing, causing hot spotting. So if we take a look at the gauge now, we can see that 2 thou is a very wide measurement, which shows that we have a lot of room. And then as we start to go down on the scale, we actually decrease that measurement. So if we take a look at the plastic gauge and use our guide, we want to pick a dimension that matches it. So if we take a look at what we've matched up on here, I've matched up 4 thou to be the width of that plastic gauge. And it's pretty consistent all the way across. If we seen one side was wider than the other or skinnier than the other, it would indicate that we either have a tapered condition or an out of round condition of the crankshaft. It's very consistent, and we look at it on the gauge and it's established now at 4 thousandths of an inch, which is at the maximum specification for the manufacturer. So at this particular point, something could be done to reduce that clearance. And in that case, what we would do is put a one size undersized bearing in, which has more bearing material to it to fit to the undersized dimension of the crank journal. So if we did the one size undersize, it's actually giving us 1 thou more clearance or more thicker bearing, which actually would give us 3 thou. So that would be the corrected thing to do, or the correct thing to do, to decrease the clearance to give us more longevity for the customer. At this point, 4 thou falls within manufacturer spec, but it's at the farthest point of the range, which doesn't provide much longevity. So over time, as those bearings wear, the oil clearance becomes bigger, and now the engine oil pressure drops. And when the oil pressure drops, then it's time to do service on the bottom end again. Next thing we're going to do here is spray and pick all the plastic gauge off of the crankshaft, making sure that we don't drop it down into the engine. And then clean it off one more time. And as you can see, we have no plastic gauge left at all. So at this particular point, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and say that this journal is okay, and we'd have to check every other one to make sure that we have the correct running clearance. Going back to the install, we're going to re-lubricate the bearing. Make sure we're going the right direction. Reinstall the cap. Use the bolts to guide. Tap the cap into position. And then run the bolts down. Once again, run down torque. Check the operation. Always check to make sure that that crank turns. Torque to manufacturer specifications. And then once again, confirming the operation. Crankshafts, when they're installed into the engine with a new fit with the correct clearances, should turn a quarter to a half a full turn. And you can see that this crankshaft turns very freely for a large displacement engine. This is a DT408 engine. Gauge